There we go. So, Jake, hopefully, like the rest of us, you can see my display showing up, can you?
Yeah, you can see it.
Jolly good, jolly good. Okay, well, let me get started. Welcome. My name is Ian Tomlin. I'm the chair of the Universal Workforce Institute. I've been primed with the opportunity to sit in the hot seat today and ask the questions of our panelists. Again, the subject today, rethinking IT sourcing, how to optimize IT spend in 2024. There could not be a better time to be asking this question because we're literally on the head of the year and it's all to play for. Today I have a great panel set with me of people that we've purposely invited for the opportunity of this discussion. I'll start with Donovan Bell. Donovan, if you just raise your hand for me, please. Now, Donovan's a really interesting personality. If you've not had the chance to meet up with him on LinkedIn, please do follow him. Not only is he interested in the subject of IT and that he's done the subject of IT procurement from both sides, from the kind of IT procurement side, but also now Donovan is on the other side of the wall from a business driver perspective. Donovan is also big on project management. Donovan, I'm going to ask you to spend a bit more time telling us about that later on in the call. And he is also very passionate about a subject that I share with him, which is DE&I, of which he is also engaged quite heavily in his own organization, sponsoring and nurturing that topic. Welcome, Donovan. I've also got Tim Matzel with me today. Hello, Tim. If you put your hand up for me.
Hi, Ian.
Morning, Tim, or should I say afternoon. Tim is actually somebody that's done IT delivery. He's been on the kind of hard techie side, holding a spanner in his hand. Tim moved very quickly, more recently, into a role as a provider of technology solutions into the IT procurement space by providing a new generation of statements of work technology. We're waiting for him to arrive, but Michael Manser is due to be here, the Senior Vice President of US Tech Solutions. He's just had a few challenges getting logged in. I'm sure that will happen in the course of the next few moments. Michael has the responsibility in US Tech Solutions to deliver change within the organization. And he is literally a utility executive. He's been doing change management projects at high level across his career that spans 20, 30 years in recruitment. Michael has a deep background in IT as well, and he is actually driving IT project change across the US Tech Solutions Group, which, if you're not aware of the organization, is a pretty vast organization now, employs thousands of people around the world. And Michael particularly is driving change through AI-powered technologies. So that's going to be an interesting thing to cover off today. Mina Metzala. Hello, Mina. Put your hand up for me. Thank you. Bless her. Mina is somebody I dragged across to this event from my meeting her at ProcureCon in Europe last year, where Mina was presenting there. Mina is truly an IT sourcing professional in the truest sense of the word. Not an IT person that just happens to jump into procurement, or a procurement person that happens to jump into IT, but Mina has been purposely through her career focusing on IT sourcing. So we're absolutely thrilled to have her in the discussion panel today. I'll just make an introduction, if I may, as well, to the hosts today. The event sponsored by US Tech Solutions. The organization is one of the largest providers of diversity talent in the contingent market space. And US Tech Solutions also has a brand associated with digital transformation called US Tech Digital. And that organization as well is heavily involved in the evolution of IT procurement methods. Now, just to set the scene here, before I jump into questions with the panel that we've got today, I just wanted to give you some thought-provoking insights about things that are happening in the organizations around the world today in the context of IT procurement. Let's look at some of the context and trends. By 2025, 80% of CIOs expect to have transitioned to a fully digital business platform. 84% of business leaders plan to use conversational AI by the end of next year. The global cost of cybercrime in the meantime is expected to reach $10.5 trillion annually by 2025. And only 39% of companies reported having visibility of their tier 2 suppliers. And meanwhile, 83% of consumers are willing to pay more for sustainability products. So should organizations be doing more in their IT stack to be thinking about sustainability? Let's also look at some of the challenges facing IT procurement at the moment. There are massive talent shortages, as we know. There are 58% of procurement professionals say they lack real-time data visibility in spend and sourcing decisions. So there seems to be only 1 in 2 business leaders in IT procurement feel that they've got the data that they need to drive decision making. We're seeing a breakdown of silos between procurement and other departments, but that's seen as key to achieving organizational goals. So is it happening quickly enough? And then we've also got the advent of conversational AI and how it's transforming the landscape. And whether that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, it's definitely happening. And the question is, who's controlling the reins, of course, with AI as we move forward? So I'm going to move on to the first question that we've got to the panel today. Let me just give you just a heads up on the questions before I jump through them, just so you can navigate them with me. We're going to start with looking at the opportunity and the challenges of IT procurement as we move into 2024. I'm then going to be picking on some of the leadership roles and responsibilities and how that's changing and how we see that is impacting on the decision making that's happening. Sir Cam has raised her hand, Jake. I don't know if you can actually cover that question on the chat for me. Could I just say to the audience that if you do have questions, do drop them on the question panel list for us. We will be coming back to them as we are going along. So finally, getting through the questions, how decisions are being made at the moment and the possibilities that IT procurement should be looking at in 2024 as we move over. And finally, I'd like to round up by asking the questions of the panelists here. What should the ambitions be around 2024 for IT procurement? Where are we going now? How is the state of health of IT procurement as we move forward? Lots to put to the panel, lots of questions to ask. So let me start with the first panel question that I've got here. What are the opportunities and challenges facing IT procurement as we head into 2024? And let me start, Donovan, with you on that question. If you could just introduce perhaps yourself to the attendees here, and just let me know what your thoughts are about the challenges.
Oh, sure. Thanks again, Ian, for having me included here. Really excited to be here, Donovan Bell. Ian has given me an intro. I'm currently the director within Global Legal Operations at Intel. And so our focus is one about how do we drive speed and efficiency to not just only our legal department, but Intel as a whole. So how do we play a role in the strategy and business imperatives? And so when you think about that from a perspective of opportunities and challenges that IT procurement faces, it's how do you gain breadth and perspective across the broad strategy? And we know that technology is an enabler of it. And so one of the big challenges you're going to be faced with is in what's the best way to overcome it? And procurement plays one of the most fascinating roles in that decision. You have to make decisions whether you're going to buy, whether you're going to build. You have to keep up with where trends are going. As we know, you'd mentioned conversational AI, and that's a huge buzzword at this point in time. And, we're trying to catch up with where technology has jumped ahead and make decisions around that. So there's a lot of challenges in regards to just posturing, education, business acumen, and being able to have speed and delivery. And so those elements. So as a procurement professional, the necessity of staying up to speed on where things are heading, but also where business trends are going.
Yeah, and I think So on the question of opportunities and challenges, Donovan, that you've just mentioned, there is it not also perhaps the expectation of your stakeholders that is also causing a bit of a challenge as well? Because I think the expectations on IT are just so high, aren't they?
100%. I think they are, in some case within reason. Again, because everything surrounds technology,
Yeah.
it's that hidden commodity that we don't know much about, and so
Yeah.
as a result, we simplify the mentality behind it. But there might be complex challenges and nuances that need to be described to be effective with.
Yeah, indeed. Mina, from coming to you, I say you are steeped in IT sourcing in your role. Perhaps you could just do a quick intro to yourself as well, though, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that is one side of me, that sourcing piece for sure, a passion for it. But being in sales as well, and as a consultant, so in all corners of the table. And I am based in Finland, working for a company called Wärtsilä, which actually is one of the largest manufacturer of engines for large vessels. So if you've ever been to a Carnival cruise ship or something like that, then you've come across our products there. But when it actually comes to opportunities and challenges, if I may, Ian, so for the challenge piece, I don't know how it is in the other continents, but particularly Europe, I sit also in our IT leadership team as well as the procurement leadership team. So I'm between two organizations very heavily. So, there we just were discussing quite a lot on the tsunami of regulation coming our way. And I think this should apply to the UK as well, even if you're not part of EU anymore. But there's the NIS directive, there's the European Data Strategy, there's the AI Act, and all that. Of course, a lot of that is like to do with cybersecurity people and legal, but still something we also need to understand and encompass and include in our contracts and the way of working. So that's definitely one, a bit of a nasty piece, I would say, because you just can't do without it. You just have to live with it and address it. So that's for sure one. And AI, how do we, I mean, everybody's talking about AI, of course. So are we soon going to be jobless? AI is going to write all our contracts and we don't need people anymore.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, though, isn't it, Mina? You were just talking really about the impact of legislation, regulation, security on the function. Is this almost creating a pressure on procurement to look in the rearview mirror back at what they've already got and spend a lot of their time, just working in the knitting, almost trying, and that's got to be a focus away from innovation, hasn't it?
Absolutely, that's the point, exactly. So that's away from all the, I would say, and God forbid me for all legal people in the in the panel or in the audience, but that's away from the strategy work that we need to do. So, but clearly that has to be addressed. So there's no way around it. So.
Thanks, Min. Tim, I'm going to move on to you. Good afternoon to you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, now, Tim, you've actually been an IT guy. You've been on the delivery side, and obviously you've moved on to the other side of the fence now. But of course, one of the big challenges I think that IT procurement has is to try to work with IT to maintain the integrity of the architecture of the systems and the data that they are operating. And we're literally seeing a firestorm, aren't we, of new software as a service applications and cloud applications. From your perspective, how do IT maintain that IT architecture when they're getting so much pressure from, from business stakeholders to keep buying new, different bits of technology?
Yeah, I think the most successful I've seen is when you have some sort of design authority role or system architect somewhere within the organization or certainly within the project. And I think those people need to balance the IT landscape against the innovation and rapid development that, as you've said, happens in projects these days. And it's a fine balance because you do not want to constrain innovation at all. I mean, I've worked in organizations where typically somebody in the user base, in the user community outside of IT, are a little frustrated at the pace of IT. So they go and build their own solution. It's an Excel spreadsheet that does something. And to be honest, from the innovation perspective, it's probably very good. There's a lot of business input to it. But the problem then becomes supporting and maintaining that application and bringing it into an IT fold. And then you find out that actually using Excel isn't the best thing. So I would say, if you could get, system architects, some sort of design authority process where that person understands the business, listens to the business, but equally that person can communicate at the right level as to the challenges that IT have, then perhaps there's a way of, together actually coming up with the right solution. It's not an easy path, but I do find that the design authority role is very powerful.
Yeah, and Donovan, Intel will have systems architects and design authority roles, but are they influential enough in the kind of broad gamut of IT procurement as it's happening now?
I think that's a great question, and I love what Tim alluded to in regards to that design authority. Influential enough, I think it depends. I think that there's capability of doing so. The challenge becomes in how well you're able to establish trust. Tim alluded to a great point in regards to some of the misnomers within IT. Not even misnomers, but the opinions and situations of taking too long, not being able to keep up to speed, not having business acumen. But if you can develop those things and have constant, you really focus on building the relationship and establishing that trust. That's where a lot of that, authorization comes into play because you kind of have to always find ways of establishing quick, fast wins and proving value, and that gives you a reputation to build that. So I've seen it where there are some key architects that are able to have that level of influence. But it can be far between the times.
I'm going to spin back to that question. Thanks, Donovan, for those thoughts, because you've provoked a few other thoughts in my head that I'm going to come back to in just a moment within the question structure that we've got. Now, I'm going to be asking our attendees the first poll question, if I may, as we're talking through these, which is, which function has the biggest influence in driving IT procurement decisions in your enterprise? So, Jake, if you could kick that poll open for me, please, as we're cracking on with the questions. For the attendees in the audience, you should see that you've got a series of questions pop up in front of you. You can just answer one of those very quickly. We'd be very grateful. And while that's all going on, Mina, let me come back to this question. I mean, Donovan was talking about, we were talking about systems architects and the design role. But then IT gets criticized sometimes for basically being a little bit too arrogant in terms of its attitude and approach. And could it be that, to get that systems architect role working, it requires a certain type of person, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure. And I'm smiling because I'm thinking, at least in my current organization, I love your smile, Donovan. Our IT leaders just cannot become too arrogant, I think, because so it is just that because we are historically very even if we do a lot of software and technology, we have about 1,000 software developers as such. But then at the same time, we still have a heritage of being a manufacturing company, and the IT leaders definitely in my domain are not arrogant. I rather think they're actually humble. So I turn that question around, that they need to be more humble than arrogant, I would provocatively say.
But isn't it also not the case that there needs to be they need to be very firm with their positions, do they not?
For sure, absolutely. And you have to have stamina to really push forward, the new technologies and the benefits of those, and particularly that the benefits it actually creates the business value, and it's not just the cost. Because the old timers, they think IT is always just the cost.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Definitely.
But I guess, Donovan, let me just spin this back to you from the DE&I perspective, because one thought I have in my head about this is I sense that a lot of people that get into IT are nerdy geeks, the people that actually like the technology. They like to get their hands on code. Is it perhaps the case that actually makes communication quite challenging because you're dealing with different ways that people think, aren't you, and communicate?
Always. And it is a challenge. And I think there's a certain makeups of people that are strong. The challenge, so I sit in the legal department. So I deal with attorneys quite frequently. It's easy to identify an attorney. They go to law school. They pass the bar exam. They get that qualification where there's a differentiate between someone who is an attorney and someone who is not for that skill set we're looking at. Technology is so broad. You have technologists that are skilled in certain areas and certain facets, and it's an ambiguous realm from time to time. And so that's where a lot of that arrogance mindset arrogant accusation comes into play because it is an ambiguous area. It's not something that we can always define, but it is always something that a lot of people just don't know about. So when you're dealing with your different business groups, they often are saying this is an area that we don't know. But we also know what it is that we want. And so it's tough when you're then dealing with a technology leader who's saying, no, that's not going to work. Or yes, which they might be right, but they have to do it from a perspective of empathy to where they understand what the business user and stakeholder is trying to articulate and why, even though they may not have the ability to understand the technology behind it. And so it's a constant relational bridge that is a necessity in order to help drive that empathy on both sides so that you can move forward into progress in this space.
Right. Thanks, Donovan. And Tim, so on the role that you've got at the moment is looking at statement of work platforms, isn't it? And democratizing those big IT projects so that you've got more personalities in. So on this subject of the behavior and attitudes and approach that you get within all of that, I suspect what we're also seeing is a democratization of those kind of responsibilities that the people on these projects have got to be good communicators, right? They've got to be people that can work with people.
Yes, absolutely. I think, what Donovan said was absolutely right. There's IT projects these days, there's so much technology and they are so complex. And, gone are the days of an individual person being able to do everything. So getting this, democratized approach, getting the specialists in to do the specialist bit of work and doing that through a statement of work so we know what the clear deliverable is, I think is the way to go. I think saying an IT leader, are they too arrogant? I think that is a bit strong. They do have a challenging environment, but I think, as Nina said, the thing is communication, and I think you raised it as well, Ian, is if we can get a good communication, a good language, trust and understanding, then I think we're going to be a lot more successful. I think the other point to note is that sometimes IT leaders and IT people can want to use a particular application. Now, I kind of get that if you've invested a lot of money into an application platform, then you should at least first see if that platform can solve the problem that's coming up with a business change or something you need to react to. However, I think there can be arrogance when there's no discussion and it's just told, no, we are going to use this platform, because I think there are opportunities to look at other technologies, to get people having a good conversation, because that can drive some innovation. You don't necessarily want the handcuffs of a large ERP system or whatever to drive the innovation forward. But it's an area that you have to be careful with.
Yeah. Jake, I think are we able to share that poll now? Is that coming up on the screen? So
Yeah,
what we
It's
found,
on the screen. Yeah,
it's on the screen.
it's
So
there.
what we found,
Yep.
yeah, it's interesting for me that we're actually seeing, I was kind of expecting, I suppose, more people talking about a democratized decision making. So we've heard so many, I think Gartner says 7.5 people make a decision nowadays. I'm not sure what the half is. I've never quite worked that out on their maths, but nevertheless, um, mostly procurement, 5%. Over 50% interest, 5% thought mostly procurement in their organization. I think that's quite a charming situation, isn't it, Mina, to have procurement driving 5%?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know what to think about that, but of course that is a matter of fact because procurement is the one who supports the decision making. So we are not making the decisions, that's for sure. So I think
Yeah,
that's just a very,
yeah.
very clear, understandable rating.
Well, while we're chattering away in the panel here, let me ask the second poll question, which is to what extent is procurement engaged in build or buy decisions? And I guess Donovan, but back to you on this first, if I may, about the question of decision frameworks and how people are thinking about IT decisions now. I think you raised the point about build or buy right at the start, ahead of the conversation, and are how do you get the organization to think, could we be buying this in rather than building it, or vice versa? What's the mechanics of that?
Yeah, I think the key is in some ways you have to have some type of governance structure.
Hmm.
That way, you're not just all over the place.
Hmm.
And when I say that, that has to be in partnership. There has to be uh, a a strong partnership with from a business and IT perspective,
Yeah,
and procurement. I
yeah,
don't want to rule that out. There's through that three-way bond
yeah,
when that's in place is fantastic.
yeah,
But you also have to have a top-down guide that says here are the guardrails around decisions that we make.
yeah,
Because trust me, you always have the divergent paths. But there has to be a kind of within reason.
yeah,
Otherwise, we go down the T path. We go down multiple different routes that we
yeah,
know aren't
yeah,
necessarily
yeah,
helpful. So
yeah. And understood. And talking about governance structures, Tim, I'm going to come back to you because obviously you've been developing a statement of work network that provides the government governance structure. Could you just explain how that works, really?
Yeah, so we start off really by identifying resources or capabilities, and
Mm,
those capabilities we store within the system, and then those people or those resources can be consumed against a statement of work. And the statement of work is it's within the platform. It allows us to put governance around that, so governance around budgets, budget spend. We can put governance around being able to sign off deliverables. So we specify, what something's going to cost, what are we delivering, when are we going to do that,
mm,
and yeah, everybody works within the same platform. So it's very, very collaborative, very clear, one version of the truth, and everything to do with comments or changes within the statement of work as it progresses from sort of draft through to first version is all recorded in the system.
right.
It stops email chases and just saves a lot of time.
Right. And Mina, I'm going to ask you the question around governance in a slightly different way, because you and I at ProcureCon, we were talking about almost like different levels of technology, different levels of governance and control. Because obviously, if you're buying a task-based SaaS tool that does a very pointy little thing, I guess you don't need the same level of control, do you, as a system of record?
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. And sorry, I can't be focusing on you, Ian, because I'm looking at the IT procurement question now on the screen because I couldn't wait the answers. I just couldn't wait. So, but but if I rephrase, going back on Ian's point, I would love to have that kind of setup that you have for the statement of work. By the way, we need to discuss after this. But But when it comes to the strategy of build or buy, then I have to say right now I'm in a lucky position that because of the fact that I've also worked in IT organization, suffering with the same problems that my colleagues on the other side of the table now are suffering, then I'm able to contribute to genuinely to the make or buy decisions, and actually currently just driving that and forcing the IT organization on a strategic level for longer term, not just on a piece of software or a small or larger project, but on the actual strategy work. So it is actually me from procurement driving it. But I doubt that if I were in the position of totally being, say, outside of the IT leadership team, would I be in the same position to be heard and drive that work forward?
Yeah,
so
I'm looking at the poll results here, and it's basically saying something like 50% of people saying that the IT procurement's sometimes engaged before any decision is made. Now, I mean, that strikes me as that's part of the problem, isn't it? Is that the IT procurement only gets asked to get involved when the decision's almost been made already that they're going to be buying something. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, I hear that some people have that problem. Just joking. But yeah.
I'm sure your boss isn't watching, Mina. I'm sure you'd be fine on that one.
I hope my boss isn't here. Anyway, but that's clear. That's clear. But I think it goes back to some of the things that already been said by Donovan. Like it's a communication and pushing your good cases forward. That they see the business benefit that you're bringing, and then you are able to join into the decision making circle, so to speak.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, but that's a sad. It's a sad thing that that still is often the case. But then you can always ask: is it because procurement isn't doing enough to be driving and be demonstrating their capability, or is it the other way around that they are just not being considered regardless what they do? So I don't know. I don't have the jury's out on that one.
Donovan, back to you on this. I'd like to ask you the question: do you think there should be a question, first of all, about on any of these strategic decisions or practical decisions about software and technology, that every decision should have a build or buy question asked of it, shouldn't it? Just to have a kind of a triage of this where IT procurement can be involved.
I think it should at least be entertained. The key is, can you have that quickly? The reason why it's not is because of the pressure. The immense pressure to move business forward, to make decisions quickly in those aspects. So how do you become a accelerator of those decisions? How do you become, as opposed to a barrier to those decisions? And I think that's what's really key is oftentimes, whether it be from IT or a procurement perspective, speaking from a business perspective, and I've sat in all seats, so I get all frustrations, and so it's helped me with empathy, sitting in the business side. So I'm very inclusive of procurement and IT up front, early and often, and there's huge value in because of that. Now that said, I think that's the key. There's that feeling of, hey, I tried to bring you in, and it ended up being more questions, more pain, more hang up, more time. That has to be something that is a constant mindset that says, I want to make sure I'm optimizing the time we're spending together. And so I need to make sure that whenever I come to the table, I'm providing some level of value. And it's as small as, even in every meeting, there's typically 2 or 3 things that get left undone, like I said. And being that person that says, you know what, I see that there's an opportunity here, I'll take that and drive it. And so having that aggressive, proactive conversation versus reactive and passive is going to be very critical for all aspects of project.
Yeah, thanks, Donovan. And Tim, I'm going to speak to you now really about the SOW type of platforms now that are coming through, and the opportunity that the contribution they make to the build or buy decisions. I mean, how does the technology potentially that's coming through help to encourage build or buy?
I think it's down to the team. So if you think about, the conversation we've just had, build or buy, my experience has been in the past, I would always say, if you get 85% of the functionality, buy it, because typically what I've seen is in organizations, you get the software developers who love developing the solution, but then they forget the documentation, they forget the release strategy, they forget all that kind of stuff, which a software company typically has.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, with solutions that kind of support this sort of team working to the same goal, thinking about, getting procurement, getting finance, getting IT, getting everybody involved in trying to recognize or figure out what that final delivery is. I believe platforms allow you to bring in people into the organization that helps you to actually build something. So therefore, I think the cost and the risk differential between building it yourself or going and buying it is getting less. I think we've still got a way to go, but I think, these platform tools can help to do that by structuring what's being delivered and accessing great talent pools that are happy to work in these kind of environments, particularly within their strengths as well. So rather than having a generalist IT person that you hire for 6 months, you can actually get a particular specialist for a particular time, involve it in that project and use the tools to manage how that interaction happens.
It's interesting, Tim, because you and I spoke, I think, last week about how IT used to be very much about a master vendor that would come in and just take over everything and deliver all the resources. But I guess this approach, this democratized approach we're seeing now begin with IT procurement, is actually helping DE&I and diversity within the project teams, I guess, because I think those organizations, those vendors, tend to hire people like themselves a bit, don't they? So would you say that that's happening?
I would, yes, I would. And if you think about, the dreaded kind of COVID situation, people are more used to working slightly different hours, working on an end game and a deliverable, and choosing when to work themselves. I think this sort of older thinking, or the thinking of the past of, the sort of 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock kind of approach, and this, large organizations just being given a task to deliver a system is changing. And I think it's changing for the best, or changing for the better. We've still got some way to go, but it's starting. And I think that the organizations that get the tools right, get the mindset right, because it is a little bit of a mindset shift, are really going to do this job well, and are going to implement better IT solutions into their organizations through that approach.
Great stuff. Thanks for that. Let me move on to the next question. And actually, I'm going to skip on to the poll here for our audience, so they have the opportunity to comment on that. How satisfied are you that your enterprise is capitalizing on all of this good stuff? So how satisfied are you that your enterprise is capitalizing on co-ideation, co-creation, and the risk sharing that presents as well? And while the audience is helping us with that question, Tim, let me ask you back about the statement of work. Do you think there's a lack of understanding in organizations, because it's quite new, about how these new methods are being adopted or can be adopted?
I think you're probably right. There are. I mean, a statement of work in its raw paper form has been there for a while. But I think understanding how it can be much more dynamic rather than being sort of set up and put in a drawer is very important. And I think being able to find the right talent that fits into the deliverables of a statement of work. I think having the mindset of thinking about the deliverables, what a statement of work does, whether it's digital or actually on paper. I think it does give a framework to think about what the end game is. What are the deliverables, but also what are the risks, the risks within the project. And as I said earlier, I think it does need a bit of a mindset change. You need to think about adopting this approach rather than this, the waterfall approach of past. Even though we have agile technologies, sometimes the actual requirements don't really change. They've been set in a statement of work, and very often forget to revisit that original statement of work, and we get these like minor changes and things which get a bit out of control.
Yeah, Mina, we've been looking inwardly at the organization pretty much from the most of this call, talking about the different departments and the decision-making processes. But what about the suppliers in all of this in terms of build or buy? Do suppliers do enough to help to educate organizations on the possibilities?
Oh, that's actually a really tricky one. Well, of course, the suppliers are doing everything they can for us to buy as much as we can. But then when it comes to the actual educating the customer, they are doing a lot of that educating, but whether that is the right one, I am not sure, to be honest.
Because I'm thinking that, I know some organizations, and I shouldn't mention any brands because I might get into trouble, but I know some organizations that are very proactive with co-innovation, co-creation. They have their own centers. They bring customers in. I think, when I see that happening, I think, well, maybe these guys are really making an impact in IT procurement from the inside looking out because they are educating. But are you seeing much of that happening at the moment?
For sure, yeah, and we are also doing some of that ourselves at Wärtsilä. But yes, I do see that, but probably not enough. Probably not enough. And I think that maybe changes a little bit from culture to culture as well. When it comes to even just different regions and even continents. So that would be interesting actually to compare between Europe, the US, Asia, and so forth. So I know
it's
if
interesting,
Tim.
Yeah. So I went to a session at a local authority in England back in like 2003 it was, where basically they opened up their arms to all of their suppliers and said, we want to deliver the best value to our customers. Talk to us. Tell us how we could do that. Donovan, isn't it about the time that organizations started looking at doing that with IT? And just kind of having these kind of open days for technology companies to come in and start playing, or does that happen at the moment already?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that, past company that I was with, leveraging strategic partners, having them come together to kind of articulate the value of that partnership. And co-innovation opportunities, those type of things. It's really huge. And I think the key is, even though you have different industries, different lines of business, lines of work, a lot of the challenges, there's a lot more commonality in some of the challenges that we face than we often give credit to. I've been in several companies where when you get to one, it's the same conversation. Well, it's done so different. But then when you look back and really unpeel some of the layers of the core problem is the same. And so to that point, as a customer or as vendors, there's a lot of value in having cross the conversations to help kind of, think different in a more innovative.
Does it happen enough? Do you think, Donovan, in your circuit, your experiences, perhaps within Intel and those, does it happen enough?
In Intel, I know we're definitely doing that and finding opportunities to, see others that are doing things and try to work together. I think it still probably can be done even more. I think that there's vast opportunity in that space, and it's a challenge because you kind of want to make sure that you're not, you don't want to share, your competitive advantage. You want to be protective of that. You want to be very careful in how open you're doing, how open of an environment you're creating so that it doesn't put your company at risk. But I think that there are ways of finding that common and working together to be very effective.
And Tim, I'm looking at the poll results now, and it's essentially saying that nobody really pressed the green button that said they're extremely satisfied with their ability to do co-ideation and co-innovation. What are your thoughts on how what's the secret of this? What does good look like if you do this?
That's a good question, isn't it? I think, we've talked about this before, and the other panelists have mentioned this. I think what good looks like is good conversation, understanding of requirements, and an understanding of the other side, and all sides being really good at communicating, what they want or why we have to go a particular way. And IT need to, have a more business focused dialogue rather than kind of a technical dialogue. So I think it is about getting everything on the table, and everybody understanding what that end game is going to be. But possibly when it's not known is to be, and I think IT need to think about this more, is rather than just saying, right, we're going to use this solution or this solution or this solution, they should kind of look at small test, implementations. They should look at, okay, we're not quite sure what the business wants here, or we're not quite sure how we're actually going to implement this. Let's look at a couple of options and let's do a really small project to try out the technology. I have been in organizations where there has been a bit of an arrogant approach to a requirement which needed to happen. And the arrogant approach meant that a particular platform was implemented without any real testing, just based on the supplier saying, yes, we can do it. And it wasn't as successful as planned. And I think if the team had much more trust in each other and had that conversation, I think that would have been a different outcome.
Can I interject something too on that?
Yeah, sure. Jump in there, Donovan.
So just real quick, great points, Tim, and just to kind of further support that too, I think one key is there has to be common benefit across all those participating. From an IT perspective, if we're partnering and driving, co-innovation, striving for that, then you've got to, once you now have come up with, here's some innovations, you got to let it happen. I've been in areas where we've done that. We built out kind of these innovation hubs and done all of this work, but then business never prioritizes that work. Tyranny of the urgent wins, and we never get to the point of unlocking any of those innovations until it's far too late. And so you have to have a means of, if we're going to do this, you've got to be able to act upon it, and you've got to make it to where it's beneficial for all parties.
Yeah. I think also, just to add on to that, is managing compromise, because when a solution covers a lot of business functions and is deployed across the organization, there has to be compromise, and figuring out and managing that compromise is something that is quite a skilled role.
Yeah. And I'm just going to go back to, Christoph Basilicus, who created apparently cloud computing when he was given the opportunity to be part of the 20% club of Google and spend 1 in 5 hours of his workday on a project that was a pet project for him. And Mina, is the problem here back to what you were talking about right early on, which is IT procurement and IT sourcing, they're so busy doing compliance, security, changes and upgrades. Is there enough capacity being allowed for innovation?
Certainly not. I would just blatantly say so. And also, overall, when it comes to talent within procurement, one should really, and there's also a question in the Q&A, but we can come back to that later. But relating to the talent and somebody starting in procurement. So I would just say that you would need to be doing things just differently, because and being a mirror image, I think, from sales would be great. So, being proactive and being like a sales guy, but basically in procurement. I can't see the difference between the two, actually. When it comes to what kind of competencies and skills, for example, the procurement people ideally, at least in my world, would have for the best benefit. So
the procurement people have to be salespeople.
Yeah. Says one who has been a salesperson before. Of course, I'm not at all biased in this comment.
Well, for our attendees there, you've got the conclusion before we get to the end of the session. Michael, you've managed to join us. Welcome.
Yes, I've been
Michael.
patiently, I've been waiting for that one comment that's going to come in, but it's been a great topic coverage so far. So
yeah, great. And on this point, then I'm gonna go on to, because I want to get an opportunity for the questions coming back at the end of the session. So let me ask the panelists here. Perhaps the big question, it is, if you have one nugget of big advice for our audience of procurement professionals, IT professionals, business leaders on this call today, what would you be saying? 2024, think about this. Donovan, what would yours be?
I think, you said, what does good look like? It's collaborative. It's inclusive. And it's forward thinking. We know there's a need to kind of keep up with where technology is at, but are we truly taking an approach of, when you know better, you do better? So are we truly understanding the need of the relationship? The technology challenges to me are minimal compared to the relational issues that we face whenever we deal with this dynamic of IT sourcing, procurement, and the business. And yet we still invest small amounts of time cultivating, driving relationship. We still spend it more on the technology itself. And so I think facing that and really coming to grips with saying, and I think it was Tim that mentioned it, having a compromised mentality. So in order to move fast, what's the minimum viable product? What's that small amount that we can find value and continue to keep chipping away at that value? And so those priorities are going to be something we're constantly taking that test and learn approach of how do we continue to get better and improve along the way, and do so with speed.
And Michael, from your perspective, where does that leadership come from for that change?
yeah, so I think, and I'm thinking in the world of workforce solutions and platforms, and the reality is that partners can be producing incredible technology for you to be able to tap into direct sourcing and on-demand talent, but it's only good if your own staff and your own culture is willing to accept it. So sometimes it's like, oh, it's all legacy solutions out there. But the reality is you could have a brand new solution, but you have a legacy attitude towards it, and then you don't embrace it. And so we've literally had to look at change management means what we're doing and what we're teaching our clients to do. So I think my suggestion for leadership in companies is be open and being more aggressive at attacking change internally too. There's a lot of opportunity to embrace, but it's not just going to be only for the vendors to bring. You have to participate. So
Amina, if I could ask you for a concise answer to that question, but for you, what would your nugget be?
I was going to say that I really loved your comment, Michael. I absolutely agree about the change. So one nugget. Well, you will know my answer now, Ian, because you've been to procurement. Please do adopt agile sourcing process, because it really yields value, especially when you want to do co-creation. So it kind of combines the co-creation, being bold, being open to new ideas, and innovate together with the supplier. If I have to say one thing, that's the thing I'm going to say.
And Tim, for yourself, just coming back to you finally, what do you think? What's the nugget for you for 24?
That's really hard to put it in one nugget, isn't it? What I'm going to say is think of your project delivery a little bit like a driverless car. So you sit in the car, you put your destination in, which you figured out what you need, and the car effectively takes you there. So you can concentrate on the journey, and the journey is a happier journey, and look for tool sets that effectively drive the car automatically for you and identify hazards and navigate around hazards. And I think with AI capabilities coming along, I think that's a real possibility.
That's great. So to our panel, let me say thank you very much for all of those contributions. I'm going to drop to the questions now, if I may, because we have got a couple. An anonymous attendee, which I always think adds a bit of spice, is asking the question, what advice do you have for young business professionals entering IT procurement with limited experience in this field? And Donovan, I know you are very much involved in a college dealing with project management. So what would your advice be?
Yeah, I think project management is something that permeates throughout, regardless of which industry you go into, and thinking of it not so much as a title, but more so as a way of working, right? And so having this core skill set. So advice I'd have is to just learn as much as you can. In that IT procurement space, it really is a matter of just really finding your niche, finding the areas that you're passionate about, and going deep and really learning. But having a perspective of what is it that you're doing, how does it apply to the strategy of the company, and understanding the aspect of what your company is trying to achieve.
Thanks, Donovan. Michael, could I ask you that question as well? Pose that question to you, because obviously you're also looking at the kind of staffing and workforce aspect of this. So what advice would you have for a young business professional entering IT procurement?
Yeah, to always think about decisions being forward thinking, that how will you be maintaining and supporting this going forward? And it's, that idea that some of the great technologies, it's so early on, you can't find people who know it, So I think it's always take that into consideration. And sometimes you've got some of your technology that's sold, nobody wants to be supporting it still. So, this nice middle ground of evolution, it'll have to be part of your decision-making process. So.
And we've got a question from Alita Gordon. Alita, I hope I've pronounced your Christian name correctly. The question is, what are your recommendations for balancing agile sourcing with safety, breach, risk protection? So with the governance and protection. So I'm going to ask Mina, I'm going to ask you this question, which is, essentially agile sourcing, this increase in speed, an acceleration that Donovan's been talking about. How do you balance that with the common sense requirements of having to deliver business as usual?
Yeah, I don't, to be honest, I've conducted numerous agile sourcing processes, and I really haven't had a problem with the safety or risk as such, what Alita is leaning on to here.
Yeah.
But I would assume what I would do is then to safeguard this one is just for the entire team working on that, or the project team together, just outlining what could be the risks of sharing certain information, so that you would prepare a little bit in advance prior to getting into the conversation with the various suppliers. So, but I really haven't had the problem with that. I think that would be interesting to know from Alita a little bit more on if she has come across any issue with that. So.
I honestly mean, I think one of the things that I'm supposed to be the independent host here, not delivering answers to the questions, but I guess my instinct comes back to the conversation you and I had in ProcureCon in Europe, which is, you know, not every piece of technology demands the same level of risk and governance as other
No,
bits.
absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah,
So I guess
you
it's a
need to know.
question of
Yeah,
no,
yeah, exactly. So you need to know the what the solution that you're looking for is intended for.
yeah,
Obviously, to start
yeah.
off with, and with that comes a higher risk or lower risk. So.
Yeah, and it's one other thought I've got on that, Alita, which is I know a very capable chief information security officer who says he's self-confessed able to take more risk because he understands the risks more. Oh, I said the name perfectly. Bless you, Alita. That's
Mm,
yeah, you've just made my evening, so thank you for that.
mm,
But certainly, I think if you've got an organization that understands risk and compliance well, I guess you can take more risks. You know, you can go close
mm,
to the wire, Tim, because of that, can't you?
Yes, I think so. Yes, because you're going into something with eyes wide open, and
Yeah,
yeah, and also, of course, thinking about the mitigation. So if something does happen, potentially do something slightly differently to mitigate that. I think the organisations that take sensible risk are obviously going to be the winners.
yeah, indeed. And so, Michael, as you are part of the host organization, can I say thank you for hosting today? Was part of this process. Would you like to have any last words to the audience about US Tech before we finish?
Just number one, I'm somewhat new with US Tech in this last year, and it's just been the most amazing career move to be able to be with a company that is has so much global footprint and so much capability that I'm really excited about where we're going. But it's also a combination of staffing and technology. So if you haven't heard what we're doing, give us a shout. So I think you'd be real excited to talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah, so could I just say to our guests on the panel, thank you very much for your contributions today. To our attendees and audience, thank you for your contributions on the polls and also the questions. And I'm going to finish the call reasonably quickly because we are on the hour and I want to make sure that we don't go too far. So thank you very much for your attendance today. And I look forward to meeting you on the next session that we run in this series. Many thanks.